Welcome to the pharmaphorum podcast. This is web editor Nicole Raleigh, and today I have with me Bill Grambley, CEO of AllazoHealth, a company driving therapy initiation, adherence, and health outcomes with artificial intelligence or AI-powered personalisation. Welcome, Bill.
Good morning.
So our conversation today will focus on leveraging AI for marketing as well as medication initiation and adherence. Today's consumers are more active participants in their healthcare. I'm sure most listeners would agree. And according to a McKinsey report, 58% of US respondents said they prioritize personal health and wellness more now versus only a year ago. Yet, many still express dissatisfaction with their overall healthcare experiences. Marketing in the era of consumer-driven healthcare requires new strategies to reach patients with the information they require and how and when they need it. But before we sink our teeth into today's topic, Bill, perhaps you could tell listeners a little about yourself and the passion that drove you on your journey to doing what you do today with AllazoHealth.
And Nicole, thank you again for the opportunity to be here. So I'm Bill Grambley. I'm the CEO at AllazoHealth, and I am on a mission to personalize healthcare. And very often we see in a variety of programs that patients are considered just a certain aspect of themselves. They have a condition, they're on a medicine, they're defined by some very specific indication of who they are, as opposed to the holistic nature of all of us as humans. And I'm on a mission to change that, to essentially enable programs to look at people holistically and deliver them the right level of care and support that they need to get the most of their healthcare journey. And at AllazoHealth, we use AI to do that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It's exciting to see some of the changes that we're able to make in the industry, where people get dramatically more out of these programs that they are involved with, because you can treat them like an individual as opposed to a widget, or as opposed to being defined only by one small aspect of who they are.
Thank you, Bill. So focus today going to be on personalization of healthcare, listeners, and then this idea of programs that look at people holistically. Now, the role of patients has evolved from recipients of care to, as we've been discussing, more active consumers of that care. From doing more research to actively questioning and approaching doctors with treatments, consumers, patients, are far more empowered than before. And according to Deloitte, more than half would be very or extremely likely to tell their doctor if they disagree with them, and 63% would switch doctors if they do not like how they communicate. This new healthcare consumer, so to speak, subsequently requires a shift in communications. So, Bill, to begin with, how can AI be leveraged to create highly personalized patient engagement strategies tailored to individual needs and preferences? I mean, can you share some specific examples of AI-powered tools that can be used to enhance patient communication and education?
So just to outline the magnitude of the problem, when we look at things like medication non-adherence and looking at new prescriptions, like 1 in 5 new prescriptions are never filled, and medication non-adherence costs somewhere in the order of $100 to $300 billion in US healthcare alone. So these problems are massive. Now, when we think about how to address those problems, when we look at how AI can work, we're a pioneer in driving those outcomes, initiation, adherence, and health outcomes using this AI-powered personalization. Our technology, how it actually works, it optimizes patient marketing, patient support programs by looking at individuals as holistic people, making predictions about those individuals. So how is Bill Grambley, how is Nicole Raleigh going to be influenced by different types of support that we can provide? Once we make those predictions and decisions, our solution will seamlessly integrate into the existing customer relationship management systems, hub service platforms, whichever execution systems exist through secure APIs to really provide that targeting. Now, when I say targeting, what that means is each patient can get the best supporting message at the best supporting time through the best supporting channel. And you can do all of these at scale. And so we're leveraging AI to sift through this large amount of data to make all of these predictions around these individuals, and then delivering to our clients the ability to now execute on that. And so they can provide that individual the right support, the right message, the right channel, the right time for each patient, again, doing this at scale. When we do this, we've proven results across multiple therapeutic areas. And so if you think about different types of therapies, one of the common questions we get is, have you done this in XYZ therapy? And while we have done this across a lot of therapies, the core technology, the core use of this AI really could apply across almost any therapy. We're looking at patients holistically. Yes, there are therapeutic or clinical reasons for certain behaviors, but also we as people, we interact with healthcare based on lots of other things going on in our lives. Do I have support at home? Can I get to the doctor? What are my financials looking like? Those things are not therapy specific. And so there are many ways to take this and actually use it across therapeutic areas, mass market medications, rare disease therapies, infused therapies. Like there's a whole variety of ways that we've applied this and proven results. And again, it all comes down to this core of we're looking at people holistically, we're making predictions about them. And then we're able to determine what is the best kind of support to provide to each person at each point in time, et cetera.
Thank you, Bill. So if we sort of tunnel down into this 1 in 5 new prescriptions never being filled, I wonder if you can address the question of how AI can be used to identify patients at risk of medication non-adherence and thereby intervene early to prevent these negative outcomes that come from that. I mean, what data sources, let's really go down, what data sources and predictive modeling techniques can you describe that can be employed to effectively develop early intervention strategies holistically?
So to start with, we use identified patient data, and then we use a variety of algorithms to create predictive models. And we use that predictive AI to therefore identify patients at risk and create the optimal engagement for each patient. And so to break that down a little further, when you think about different patients, and you can use like my mom as an example, right? When I think of how my mom works within healthcare, she is obviously older. She is not quite as technically savvy. Yes, she is now texting, which we're all excited about, but it's a very different engagement for her as a person than it would be for me or other family members. And when you start with looking at her, and you can use identified data on her, and there's a variety of sources. It could be enrollment related data. So when they enroll in a program, they have a variety of data that they provide. It could be from their doctor, again, as part of these different programs. It could be consumer behavior data, things that are available for us as consumers that we could access. And with the right permissions, you can get all of these different kinds of data sources. So when we start to use that, we actually look at how does each potential outreach impact, like my mom? Does it make sense to text her? Does it make sense to call her? Should you send an app notification to her? Do you actually want to send something to a pharmacy that will engage with her? So there's a whole variety of different things that you would do. And the way to support my mom is going to be different than the way you would want to support me. And through these predictive models, through this identified patient data, you're able to actually do that. When we think about essentially this next best action idea, we have models, we have data sets, we have a variety of things that include things like pharmacy fill information, demographics, social determinants of health, consumer behavior. Again, data that comes from the program itself, like how did they react to different outreaches in the past. And then we use both that data about the individual and a data set of over 2 billion claims, 275 million touch points, things that we've been able to drive outreach on. All of that basis of learning is what we use to create these predictive models. And so for my mom, as an example, we can look at her, we can see other people that are similar to her age, that have similar consumer behaviors, that have similar backgrounds, similar types of healthcare behaviors that we can see in the data, and use all of that within this specific program to make specific recommendations on what to do for her.
So, what are the ethical implications of all this, of using AI to collect and analyze patient data? I mean, how are pharmaceutical companies, how are they ensuring patient data privacy and security are ensured while leveraging AI to improve outcomes?
So there are certainly ethical questions that need to be addressed when you're looking at any program. And it is a big part of when we talk to a new organization. How do we make sure that, what we think that they're doing is appropriate, what they see us doing is appropriate, et cetera. At the base level, it's crucial that patients are opting into these programs. So it could be as simple as opting in on a web page. If you go to a branded website, and you want to get more information, you're telling them, please contact me, here's my info. In the hub world or the patient support program world, it could obviously be much deeper than that, right? It could include clinical information that they're providing, et cetera. And so within that opt-in, essentially, you need to make sure that the opt-in includes the ability to use this data to then provide better support. And when you've done that, when you have that part of the opt-in for the pharma company or its vendors, you can now start to use that patient data to help them on their medication journey. Now, it is very important to make sure that the right levels of privacy, security, all the compliance, the legal protocols, all of that have been reviewed. We obviously feel very comfortable with that. When we onboard a new client, we work with that client's legal, commercial, IT, whoever we need to. And our technology is built within a Microsoft Azure. It's fully HIPAA compliant, HITRUST certified, et cetera. You need to make sure all of those things are there because we do have a responsibility to only use the data in the way that's supporting the patient. And so again, on our side, very clear to do that. When we work with a client, we make sure all of those things are discussed, reviewed, approved, et cetera. But in the end, the way that we're approaching this is what can we do to support that patient? And so if they've given us permission to use their data to support them, that's the approach that we take. And there may be other desires that other organizations have for the data. And so that's where we've kind of drawn this very bright line between what we do and what other organizations might do. We are here to support that patient in how do they get the most of their healthcare journey.
Thank you, Bill. So very clear that the focus is on the patient in what AllazoHealth does. So if we think more generally around what you've just brought up, which are the compliance issues, etc., how can more generally pharmaceutical companies navigate what is an evolving regulatory landscape to ensure that AI-powered interventions comply with relevant regulations and guidelines? Could you perhaps share with us some of the key challenges and the opportunities that are there?
So certainly pharma companies have teams dedicated to reviewing these programs, to making sure that they have the right kind of regulatory oversight, the right guidelines, their MLR committees, legal teams, compliance teams, et cetera. And those are a key part of this whole process. When we think about AI within this, though, it's generally unregulated. Right now, it's not as if now there is specific regulation about data, right? And we talked a little bit about that and from the ethical standpoint. But like, what kinds of models can be used? How do you leverage or limit or whatnot AI? It's such a broad phrase that it could mean a lot of different things. And so in general, AI targeting technology is pretty unregulated, partly because when we make these decisions about what kind of support to provide to a customer, it's with pre-approved outreaches. We're not creating something brand new that hasn't been reviewed. It's pre-approved. The teams are already in there, trained. They know how to integrate and work with patients. Content has been approved, and so we're picking the right content to use. Now, I would say that generative AI solutions are obviously a newer landscape here. And that, I think, there is going to be a lot more scrutiny on. People have heard about like hallucinations in generative AI, and where it gets confused about reality and starts to create things. And so we've specifically avoided that world because, again, it is very compliance oriented, and so we are picking across pre-approved things. Now you can get pretty granular with those choices, though. So one of the things that we've done is what we call dynamic modular content, and that would include, for example, using different images within a certain email based on the individual. So you may have an image that has a family as opposed to an image that has, an older couple watching the sunset, right? People may react differently to those, but they're still pre-approved. And so we can get pretty granular with that level of content. The other thing I would just highlight is that to ensure that all of the privacy, security, compliance, et cetera, is all above board, all approved, we go through a pretty rigorous onboarding process. And so that would include, looking at the content, looking at the data, talking about what data we're going to get, what data we'll provide back. All of that is part of the onboarding process, and very important to make sure, to the original question, that as we think about the evolving landscape on regulations and guidelines, we're all aligned with how we're supporting that.
Thank you, Bill. So let's go towards a sort of summarization of our conversation thus far. Overall, how can pharmaceutical marketers best address patient needs as individuals, a key word in today's discussion, and leverage AI, data, and findings on human behavior to help boost medication initiation, adherence, compliance, and health outcomes?
I'm just going to go back to where I started here, which is looking at individuals as individuals. Really start to think about, when I create a program, when I have a patient that is taking my medicine, when I have a patient that is engaging with my company through, a marketing type program, a patient support program, however, that I need to recognize that those people have individual needs, that they have different support mechanisms, they have different backgrounds, they have different experiences, and I need to reflect that in my program. And therefore, when you start to ask the question, how do I support an individual? It leads to a different set of choices about the program, the design, the content, et cetera, compared to what is my overall patient journey that I'm going to put patients into. And so you can start to ask the question, how do I support this individual? And that answer is likely different than the next individual. So you really have to personalize these programs to bring it down to the level that you've created this journey with the right level of variation, allowing AI and predictive models to now pick across those options and support that patient over time. And again, we see all sorts of different flavors, but in the end, if you do these things appropriately, you can increase initiation. We've seen initiation rate increases in the 10 to almost 20%. You can increase adherence. We've seen adherence increases in terms of days on therapy in the same magnitude. You can improve your compliance because you have this whole ecosystem now that is driving to that individual. But at the end of the day, and probably the most satisfying part, is that the patient gets a better outcome. They're supported better. They're taking their medicine appropriately, more appropriately, better according to their doctor's orders. And they get more out of the medicine than they would if they were not supported in this way. And so we're really excited about both the work that we do and the change we see in the industry supporting patients at an individual level and not kind of as a population as a whole, looking at them through a program.
Thank you, Bill. And so lastly, and probably just to reaffirm what you've just said, if we look to the future horizon, what needs to be done to continue to enable pharma marketers to more effectively engage patients directly using AI and consumer intent and increase therapy initiation and medication adherence, as we've been discussing, and deliver marketing operations efficiently at the individual level, but also importantly, as you mentioned earlier today, at scale?
I think the biggest thing is for the program owners, marketing, patient support leaders, whomever, to really ask that question. If I start to think of that person individually, how can I actually adjust my program to support the decisions that need to be made to enable that level of personalization? And so just to give you a couple of quick examples, there's a lot of talk about these kind of A/B tests. Is version A better than version B? And if your ingoing question is, I need to pick between A or B for my program, you have immediately lost part of the population that responds better to the second choice. But now if you open yourself up to the question that if I can use predictive modeling and AI, I don't have to pick between A or B for my whole program. Both A and B can be part of my program. Those questions come to the basis of these programs overall. How do I actually ask the question, can I use AI? How do I use AI? What does that mean for my program? And if the program owners start to ask those questions, it very quickly leads to I can use AI, I can use predictive modeling, I can actually now take my program and make it more impactful for each individual. And so for all the owners out there, ask those questions, ask what they can do to actually make their programs more personal. And it's not purely an operational question. It's not about call centers and whatnot. It's about program overall and how do I actually integrate these choices into the program. And that's obviously what we do. But that is the question that I would say they should ask.
Thank you, Bill. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you.
And so that concludes another episode of the pharmaphorum podcast. You can find more information about this episode, including a download link and information about previous installments at pharmaphorum.com/podcasts. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, Podbean, and pretty much wherever you get your other podcasts. Just search for pharmaphorum and press subscribe. Of course, don't forget to visit our website itself, where you can sign up for daily and weekly news and analysis bulletins. And do follow us as well on X or Twitter and LinkedIn at pharmaphorum. That's all for now. Thank you for listening.